Some observers believe experimental additives are turning these long lines of exhaust into chemical contrails. They call them chemtrails. They say it's all part of secret atmospheric tests, and humans are the unknowing guinea pigs.
There's no evidence for supporting that assertion.
Are some contrails more than normal fuel emissions and frozen water vapor? We call on witnesses from both sides. And experts conduct several experiments, searching for ominous substances and a final verdict as we examine the best evidence. Contrails have existed for as long as aircraft have flown. They normally occur when hot engine exhaust meets humid and frigid air at high altitudes.
So a jet plane flies through this cold atmosphere. It produces a hot exhaust that is mostly composed of carbon dioxide and water vapor.
This exhaust condenses into visible ice crystals. They form white streaks which can linger for minutes or hours. Aviation experts claim with increased air travel we're seeing more contrails. There's nothing more to it. But some people believe that the same aircraft can release experimental chemical additives in the air as chemical contrails or chemtrails. In this way, government agencies can either manipulate the weather or counteract global warming. But some people claim chemtrails are harming an unsuspecting public. Eyewitnesses and researchers who believe in chemtrails say that jet contrails don't vanish within minutes as they once did. They now linger and spread, sometimes for hours, forming strange, suspicious patterns. Rosalind Peterson is one of those believers.
It's not normal for us. It's a grand experiment.
Peterson lives in Northern California near San Francisco. At one time, she worked for the State Department of Agriculture. Part of her job involved being aware of environmental issues.
I first started noticing unusual contrails in 2002 when it was brought to my attention by a friend of mine. He took me outside of his office and we began to look at these persistent jet contrails.
Peterson thought she saw a connection between aircraft activity and reports of chemically contaminated water in communities throughout California.
There were unusual high spikes in chemicals and heavy metals. Barium, aluminum, manganese, magnesium, zinc. And I suspect that we're getting the pollution from something in the atmosphere that's being released.
Peterson became so alarmed about the chemical contrails that she formed an organization called California Skywatch, a group dedicated to clean air.
I started documenting what I was seeing. I took pictures on my breaks. I took pictures at lunch hour. I started to really get angry because our once deep blue skies were no longer deep blue. They would turn into a white haze, and they would turn into these man-made clouds blocking the sunlight.
Peterson discovered that she wasn't alone in her concerns. Hundreds of websites revealed that persistent airplane contrails had become a worldwide problem.
I started then to research internet sites and government agencies, the EPA, NOAA, NASA, the United States Air Force. I learned that there was a lot of atmospheric heating and testing programs going on. I learned that there was lots of equipment that would leave these type of persistent plumes and spray chemicals.
Will Thomas is an investigative journalist who believes that some contrails are part of secret atmospheric experiments. He's been writing about them for over 10 years.
This is a deliberate project to slow down global warming.
These trails were appearing over rural areas, away from navigational beacons and normal air routes. They would appear for weeks at a time and then disappear entirely, only to reappear months later, unlike normal scheduled air traffic.
Thomas believes chemical contrails are an indication that someone is using jet emissions to engineer the weather and slow climate change.
The problem with chemtrails is that when we attempt to geoengineer and interfere with complex interrelated atmospheric processes, we are in for unintended consequences on a major scale.
Geoengineering is the artificial manipulation of Earth's environment on a large scale. In the early 1990s, American nuclear physicist Edward Teller was among the first scientists to model an experiment that would address the issue of global warming. He speculated that aluminum oxide could be injected into the upper atmosphere. It would act like tiny mirrors and deflect a portion of the sun's rays back into space. Supposedly, it was never put into practice. But activists believe the government has revived Teller's theory with some dire health consequences.
Some of the literal fallout from this chemtrail project are these 10-micron particulates falling by the megaton on unsuspecting people, plants, and wildlife. Now, a human hair is 100 microns across. 10 microns is submicroscopic. It can impact our lungs, it can inflame our hearts, give us heart disease, leading to fatalities. So this material comes down randomly in invisible clumps.
Dave Dickey also believes in chemtrails. As a landscape contractor for a large city, he spends a lot of time out of doors.
Contrail development is different than it ever has been in the past. And I do remember one in January of about 2002, where the number of flights overhead were extremely unusual. The number of contrails in the sky was unbelievable. We're counting 40 to 60 flights. And out of those 40 to 60 flights, most of them left an incredibly persistent large plume which would spread out and cover the sky.
As a landscaper, Dickey has to be familiar with the types of trace chemicals usually found in the environment. He regularly takes water and soil samples and has them tested.
There was some research done that claimed that aluminum oxide could be used to reduce global warming. And I thought that if there was any chance that aluminum oxide would be used in the atmosphere, that it would show up in precipitation.
He collected rain samples on days when he noticed heavier than usual air traffic and took them to a lab.
And I expected to see baseline measurements where aluminum would show up in precipitation at about 0.0093 milligrams per liter. Very small amount of aluminum naturally present in precipitation. It was 20 times higher approximately than what was expected to find.
Dave Dickey believes that what he captured was the fallout from chemically laden contrails.
I was really hoping that we'd find natural water samples, and when I did find aluminum and barium, it's just another one of the indicating factors that something was unusual.
Theoretically, scientists can cool the Earth using chemical compounds placed in the upper atmosphere. But could other substances be put there for more ominous purposes? Military victory or defeat can depend on the weather. A commander who can control the weather has a weapon as powerful as any air force. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military began seeding clouds along the Ho Chi Minh Trail to create floods and wash out North Vietnamese supply routes. It was known as Operation Popeye, and crews flew over 2,000 spray missions.
I was told initially by a friend, he said his brother was in the military service. He said when there is these heavy spray days, heavy days when there's lots of persistent contrails to keep his family inside, when they were outside exposed, to have them go in and take showers. And he couldn't talk about it. He couldn't explain more than that.
We have extensive studies that the civilian aircraft, the airliners, were laying plumes that basically dissipated within seconds to 2 minutes. The military aircraft in the same airspace laid plumes lasting 4 to 8 hours. The weather conditions are the same. The plumes are entirely different. One is civil and one is military. Something is going on.
Dave Dickey also believes the U.S. military is behind a lot of the chemtrail activity. He claims to have seen 2 very suspicious contrails while touring a civilian airport.
It was actually the day we spotted 2 aircraft, 2 KC-135s, and it was call sign Petro 011 and Petro 012. The air traffic controllers were kind of showing us how the tower worked, and And they identified these two aircraft as two American military KC-135s. And what we could see was a contrail. We couldn't see the aircraft. It was just amazing to watch the grid patterns that the KC-135s were leaving.
People who research chemtrails are convinced there's a conspiracy underway to change the weather. But Rosalind Peterson, Will Thomas, and Dave Dickey have one key burden of proof working against their case. They have no means of capturing the chemical content they claim is so harmful to humans and the environment. The challenge for best evidence will be to devise a number of experiments to do just that.
Coming to DVD and Blu-ray, For Friends.
We need to get away.
Road trip? 2,000 miles.
I'm a computer programmer. What are you doing? Kill.
How wild
What did you do? I blew up their bar.
can it get with wild deleted scenes, bloopers,
Did it get dark in here?
an outrageous alternate ending,
Daddy's home.
and much more?
Right on top, baby. Yeah.
Wild Hogs. Own it on DVD and Blu-ray high def Tuesday, August 14th.
I can't believe you're going away to school.
Hey, the guy's got to find his own way.
You put the four of us in your five.
Yes, sir.
Who's this Ellen?
Just a girl in my five.
Hold on, you gotta not tell us about that.
Do you have
Is she
pictures?
foxy?
Hey, buddy, ready to go?
Yeah.
Ellen, honey, let's go.
It's your mom. That's adorable.
Where's his underwear? I gotta stitch his name in it.
High Five from Rogers, now with unlimited long distance. Talk and text on any network.
The latest video games are here at the Walmart Electronics Department.
Take full advantage of your team's strengths and exploit your opponent's weaknesses in Madden NFL 08. With the all-new Read and React system, you can now identify mismatches prior to the snap and look to capitalize on big play opportunities on every play. Also featuring new player spotlighting, spectacular catches, and incredibly smooth gameplay. Madden NFL 08 from EA Sports. Rated E for everyone.
We'll beat every retailer's new release prices on video games every day.
Does your dandruff and oily hair make you want to disappear? Try Head & Shoulders Citrus Breeze. It fights dandruff, and its formula with citrus essences helps remove excess oil and grease. It leaves your hair beautiful, light, and free of visible flakes. Make your confidence reappear with Head & Shoulders Citrus Breeze.
There are food combos that are full of themselves, and some that are just full of good stuff.
You got me hooked on the Special K fruit and yogurt.
Isn't it great?
Don't even get me started. The yogurty flavor, the fruit clusters, it's totally got it together.
It's food that just feels good.
Let's have a moment for feeling good. And we're back.
Why try the delicious goodness of new Special K fruit and yogurt flavor cereal? Because feeling good never looked better.
Here they go again.
Not good at all.
Nah. Canada's worst drivers. Behind the wheel. Front and center. Crashing in for a third season. Canada's worst driver this fall.
A growing number of people believe that seemingly normal contrails are in fact experimental chemtrails. As such, these compound-laden artificial clouds drift and linger in the sky. Chemtrail believers think it happens for several reasons.
This is a deliberate project to slow down catastrophic global warming.
I think that some of the programs have to do with military operations.
Leading experts who monitor the Earth's atmosphere say jet contrails are nothing more than man-made artificial clouds. And like other clouds, they can affect the climate. Dr. Wayne Evans is an atmospheric scientist. He uses remote sensing devices, such as satellites and a spectrometer, to study greenhouse gases and the contents and behavior of contrails. He first noticed contrails because they formed at the same high altitudes as cirrus clouds.
And you see the two contrails forming amongst the natural cirrus cloud that's moving in. So the contrails are forming cirrus cloud, and there's natural cirrus cloud in the same area. Well, most natural clouds actually reflect more sunlight back to space than they supply infrared heat energy towards the Earth. However, cirrus clouds are different. They actually radiate more heat energy than they reflect solar energy back to space. And therefore, cirrus clouds contribute to global warming.
Cirrus clouds drift in the same upper atmosphere as contrails. When the humidity and temperature are just right, contrails can themselves become cirrus clouds and have the same warming effect on the climate. Patrick Minnis has specialized in cloud research for 25 years at NASA Langley Research Center.
The notion of chemtrails is just ludicrous. I've heard many different ideas of why these contrails are called chemtrails and the reason why they would be occurring, and it appears that no one seems to agree on anything except that they're not contrails. They don't really have an explanation for what they are, and they're not willing to really look at the simplest explanation, is that they're contrails. We had found that contrails were producing much more cloud cover than we ever thought they did. This one particular aircraft produced a contrail that was covered an area of 4,000 square kilometers and lingered for 6 hours. But we also found that there were contrails covering much larger areas and lasting more than 20 hours.
If contrails are so pervasive and efficient at spreading over large areas of the sky, could scientists use them in experiments that could benefit the environment?
You could view contrails as a form of inadvertent weather modification.
Deliberate weather modification is an attempt by atmospheric scientists to nudge Mother Nature in the right direction. Using aircraft with spray mechanisms to dispense chemical compounds into the sky, weather can be suppressed or intensified over a limited area for a period of time. Dr. Joseph Golden is a weather modification pioneer. He's been studying weather for the U.S. government for over 40 years.
No matter what we do, there will be people that are convinced that something secret is going on. The earliest that I was involved in weather modification research in the United States was with Project Storm Fury, which has a history dating back to the 1960s. The goal of the Storm Fury experiments was to weaken the hurricane by as much as 10 to 15%.
Project Storm Fury experimented with a process known as cloud seeding. Aircraft would fly into the eye of hurricanes and spray silver iodide. In theory, the chemical compound would bond with the supercooled moisture in the hurricane and cause it to freeze. A number of complex changes to the eye wall were supposed to take place and weaken the hurricane's destructive speed and power. Eventually, the project failed as costs escalated into the millions of dollars without demonstrating conclusive results. But as technologies advanced, cloud seeding was put to other uses.
In the last 10 years, there have been major advances in the type of silver iodide that we're using.
Terry Krause is a meteorologist and project manager for North Dakota-based Weather Modification Incorporated. The company owns a large fleet of aircraft and conducts cloud seeding projects in more than a dozen countries around the world.
The demands for fresh water are increasing. People think nothing of drilling wells and extracting groundwater. Well, now we're trying to use modern technology to extract water that goes unused in this river of water vapor that is passing over us each second of the day. A lot of people don't realize that California has been conducting wintertime cloud seeding for almost 50 years to supply the increasing demand for water in California.
If chemicals like silver iodide dispensed from aircrafts can make it snow in California and rain on the wheat fields of Indiana, what's to stop atmospheric scientists from engineering the climate on a global scale? Geoengineers look at ways to alter climate systems by introducing chemicals into the upper atmosphere. Scientists recognize that one of the most efficient and economical ways to do this is with the use of high-flying aircraft.
We're certainly not going to do anything that might endanger the climate system. Geoengineering has been around for a number of decades, but because the climate system seems to be changing more rapidly than we expected, then we're resurrecting the idea and considering it more seriously.
Tom Wigley is at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. He has published theories about geoengineering as a strategy to combat global warming.
The particular type of geoengineering that I've considered in some detail is putting sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. If there's a big explosive volcanic eruption like the eruption in 1991 of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, sulfur dioxide is injected into the stratosphere, aerosols form, and there is a measurable and fairly well understood cooling effect.
The sulfur dioxide from volcanoes has a beneficial effect on climate. It can reflect solar rays, cool the Earth's atmosphere, and offset global warming. Scientists like Tom Wigley see a lesson in this.
We could fly airplanes in the upper atmosphere, in the stratosphere, and have big tanks of sulfur dioxide that we injected into the stratosphere as the planes flew around.
Is it conceivable that aircraft fuel might contain secret additives to make weather modification and geoengineering a reality? In an attempt to resolve the differences in this case, believers and skeptics will go head-to-head on the controversial subject of chemical contrails.
Tomorrow, at the 4th hour, the battle has come to the city. Young Caesar Octavian to engage with the renegade Mark Antony. Eulogies will be delivered, promising dominion of all Rome. Salvation is at hand. All eligible citizens may attend.
Have a taste of the freshest seafood recipes from coast to coast. From the Atlantic, try a classic lobster and crab bake. And from the Pacific, maple glazed salmon and shrimp. For a short time at Red Lobster. Come see what's fresh today.
The latest video games are here at the Walmart Electronics Department.
Take full advantage of your team's strengths and exploit your opponent's weaknesses. In Madden NFL 08, with the all-new Read and React system, you can now identify mismatches prior to the snap and look to capitalize on big play opportunities on every play. Also featuring new player spotlighting, spectacular catches, and incredibly smooth gameplay. Madden NFL 08 from EA Sports, rated E for everyone.
We'll beat every retailer's new release prices on video games every day.
I'll arm wrestle you for the last glass of Cool Quenchers. You're on. Yes. I love you.
Defrost in the microwave. McCain Cool Quenchers. With half the sugar.
The experts at Oral-B dream of a plaque-free world for everyone. So they created a manual brush that is making plaque-busting history. The Cross-Action Vitalizer from Oral-B. Cross-Action's patented crisscross bristles reach between teeth and remove up to 90% of plaque in hard-to-reach places. A world with less plaque. Now that's a beautiful place to be. Oral-B Cross-Action Vitalizer. Brush like a dentist.
I'm Joanne Roberts, and I'm a piano teacher. A rock had chipped my windshield, and it had spread right across the driver's side.
Did you know you had a crack in your windshield?
Oh. Apple Auto Glass took care of everything. They certainly know what they're doing.
Canada's local auto glass experts.
Tomorrow, Mike Rowe tries shearing alpacas on dirty jobs. Then, Ryan faces the extreme pull of gravity on guinea pig. And later, Mean Machines. Tomorrow on Discovery Channel.
Daily Planet went to India, and a little bit of India has come back to Daily Planet.
I like you. This is good. Kim's incredibly enthusiastic, and she's spontaneous.
Kim Jagtiani joins Jay on Daily Planet this September.
I love that.
There's been an explosion in commercial air traffic over the last decade.
There are regions in the United States where there are so many jets, where the jet traffic is so high that in fact you can get substantial amounts of contrail clouds that blend together. This is something very, very different.
Some people believe that contrails can be transformed into chemtrails when jet fuel is combined with chemical additives. They claim that airborne experiments to control the weather and slow down or reverse global warming have begun. They say that the sheer number and persistence of contrails in the sky is visible proof. Others disagree.
There's no evidence for supporting that assertion.
Who's right and who's wrong? Or is the truth somewhere in between?
I designed this poster as a jet contrail index to show the different types of contrails that people are seeing in the skies. And these different types of persistent contrails, I have questions about. Why these formations? Why different dispersion rates? Why do we have X's? Why do we have long parallels with wisps coming up, these persisting parallels? We have knots on a rope. What's actually going on?
Best Evidence took California environmental activist Rosalind Peterson's photos to NASA cloud expert Patrick Minnis for his opinion on the jet contrail patterns Peterson finds so incriminating.
These are some very imaginative names and very, very interesting.
Why do they come in a long line from a jet and then go to a burst?
What this shows here is a picture of a contrail that appears to go into a cirrocumulus cloud. I doubt if either one of this has anything to do with this one. This may be at a different altitude.
Looking at the same visual evidence, Patrick Minnis sees contrails and clouds, where Rosalind Peterson sees chemtrails.
We have skies that show one type at the same time as another type, and we get vibrant spectrums, for example, that look like this.
This is a halo feature that you often see with ice crystals. There's just an infinite variety of things, as these pictures are witness. Just it all depends on how the plane's flying through, the condition of the engines, whether there's any turbulence. The atmosphere is a fluid, just like the ocean. It's full of waves. So there's an explanation for all of these patterns that you see.
I think that one of the reasons that you have the jets doing what they're doing is so that they can see their experiments in space. The satellites can see them from above or below. They can see which way wind moves. They can see dispersion levels. They can see the impacts.
Dr. Wayne Evans has observed contrails using satellites and analyzed their chemical composition with a land-based spectrometer.
There's two spectra on here. One is a spectrum of the jet contrail, which is blue, and the other one is a clear sky a couple of degrees off the contrail. We've done that on several occasions, and we detected a number of gases: nitrogen oxide, nitrogen dioxide, nitric acid, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and we saw methane. We haven't seen any evidence of strange chemicals being in there.
Whether clouds or contrails, their contribution to climate change is an acknowledged fact. But chemtrail believers go a step further.
Well, jet fuel emissions lead particulates. The EPA and health officials all tell us that particulates are a pollutant and that they exacerbate asthma and other things.
Those who believe in chemtrails keep a close eye on the health of those who live under these overhead activities.
In incidences where doctors and nurses reported very high levels of emergency room admissions, 2 and 3 times above normal, in 122 cities, they said it's not the flu. They said we do not know what this is. Correspondents in those cities contacted me and reported, in their words, heavy chemtrail activity. We can go further and say that air traffic controllers in the United States have privately expressed their concern to us, the investigators, of public health problems because of this particulate matter falling down, which could very possibly be bringing down viruses, fungi, and bacteria that live and breed in the upper atmosphere.
the advancing warm air in front of the cold front is moist. The pressure's dropping, so you get allergies and all sorts of different things are occurring, and that's one reason I expect that that people are associating contrails with illness or bad feeling.
Some industrial practices pollute the planet and cause global warming. But chemtrail believers also say that the evidence of higher than normal levels of aluminum and other metals in the atmosphere is a direct result of airborne experiments with climate change. The theory behind geoengineering is that scientists could put substances into the upper atmosphere that would reflect sunlight back into space, lowering surface temperatures to combat global warming. But has this concept already gone beyond theory?
These ideas have been around for a long time, and they range everything from firing artillery shells full of soil into the stratosphere to using synthetic chemicals like aluminum oxide, which if the particles were small enough, they might float around in the atmosphere for a number of years and reflect sunlight. And finally, using gases such as sulfur dioxide, which reflects sunlight. So in effect, what you would achieve is putting millions of tiny mirrors in the atmosphere that would reflect sunlight.
The government of the United States and other governments are not going to admit to the chemtrail project. They would have to admit the dire gravity of the situation we are in. Now we are far down the road. It becomes harder and harder to admit that, in fact, this has been going on for years.
Well, I think it's not true, because the main tenet that these people profess is that there is some increase in the amount of jet contrails in the atmosphere, and therefore it's due to the expansion of these government-funded black projects. Well, the fact of the matter is that the increase in jet contrails can easily be attributed to one thing: increase in air travel, and that there is some concern about the effect that may have on climate, but not because of some kind of a conspiracy involving government agencies operating in secret to do some nefarious things.
Both parties in this case are deadlocked. Are contrails just a matter of mistaken identity? Put to the test, with the most sophisticated equipment available, will a jet fuel emission reveal itself to be a chemical contrail?
What if the world you knew was being replaced?
What are you really inoculating them for?
Every person, every feeling.
We're gonna get through this.
On August 17th, you could be next. Nicole Kidman.
We have to stop him.
The Invasion.
Never before has prehistoric Earth come to life in a theatrical event so grand. It will inspire, amaze, and captivate audiences around the globe. Don't miss the event that's been over 65 million years in the making. Walking with Dinosaurs, the live experience. August 8th through 12th in the Air Canada Centre. Reserve seat tickets on sale now.
Too cool, keeping them cups so cold it's too screw. Far from the regular, nothing you used to. Them kind of style is serpent supposed to. Mind and soul and tune and loose too. Cooler than cool.
Hello, Moto.
Because of my dust allergies, venturing up here used to be a nightmare. But now that I discovered Claritin, I'm Claritin Clear. Claritin relieves my indoor allergy symptoms caused by dust and pets without making me drowsy. That's clear. Claritin Clear.
I can't have allergy symptoms keeping me from being alert on the job. So now, I'm Claritin Clear. Claritin Allergy and Sinus Extra Strength relieves my worst allergy congestion for 24 hours without making me drowsy. That's clear. Claritin Clear.
Have a taste of the freshest seafood recipes from coast to coast. From the Atlantic, try a classic lobster and crab bake. And from the Pacific, maple glazed salmon and shrimp. For a short time at Red Lobster. Come see what's fresh today.
Music as a force for change, I think, is incredibly powerful.
We shall overcome.
Clowns can get away with murder.
Princess is in the intensive care unit of the Southeast Paris Hospital.
You embark immediately on a road of forgiveness.
I stood up the world! I stood up the world! I stood up the world!
Both sides in the chemical contrail debate agree that aviation fuel, like all engine fuels, contains harmful pollutants. However, only the chemtrail believers claim that secret additives in jet fuel are being used in weather modification experiments. Could scientists test a random sample and find high levels of aluminum oxide or other unexpected compounds and solve the case? We traveled to Flint, Michigan in search of the best evidence.
I'm a laboratory coordinator here for Kettering University. This is a small jet turbine. This device is a model of a larger jet. It functions just like a large jet engine does.
Best evidence has come to Kettering University to conduct a series of tests on commercial jet fuel with a team of experts in chemical and mechanical engineering led by Dr. Greg Davis.
After I received the call from Best Evidence, I contacted Dr. Robert Gettner in our chemistry laboratory. Then I pulled together Mr. Ray Rust. He's the technician that runs the laboratory facility we're sitting in now. This is where we actually test the fuel and test the emissions that are produced.
The Kettering staff took about a week to shift the main facility from automotive engine testing to the jet turbine experiments. Sensitive equipment was tested and calibrated with a number of trial runs. Test day began with the purchase of 5 gallons of randomly selected commercial jet fuel from the local airport.
The jet engine we have in the lab is a scale model jet engine. It does everything that a commercial jet engine would do on an airliner. And it's got the added advantage that we're running it in a lab, so it's a controlled environment. So we can control the fuel that we feed it. We can draw the samples of the emissions.
Best Evidence has asked the scientists at Kettering to look for any traces of aluminum in both the liquid fuel as well as the emissions after it combusted in the jet engine. Aluminum appears to be the metal most often identified by people who believe there is a conspiracy to turn contrails into chemtrails.
That would seem surprising to me just because of the issues that engines like this have with throwing strange components into the fuel. So it seems like if there was aluminum in the fuel, you'd have trouble with the turbine, for example, or you'd end up with metal plating showing up in the exhaust port. So it seems that that would introduce some definite problems that the engine designer would have to take into account for in order to make the engine survive that.
While Ray Rust prepares the engine for its flightless journey using our sample of test fuel, Greg Davis selects the special quartz filters. They will capture samples of soot and particulate matter from the jet emission.
So what I'm doing now is I've just placed the quartz filter element into the holder. It's in here. So I'll be doing that with both of those. Now the problem you run into with these is the amount of particulate you gather is relatively small. So things like fingerprints can actually skew your sample so much as to be unreadable. So that's why what we have to use are tweezers to touch the filter elements. That drives off any impurities.
Meanwhile, upstairs in the chemistry lab, Dr. Rob Gentner is preparing solutions to form the basis of several tests.
So what I have here is a test tube with isopropyl alcohol in it. I'm going to place a piece of aluminum metal in there. I will then add concentrated hydrochloric acid, which will mix with the isopropyl alcohol and start to react with the aluminum metal that's in there.
Sure. So it's reacting with the aluminum that's in the alcohol then, right? Yes. Okay.
So I've taken some of the jet fuel, which you gave to me. There's some isopropyl alcohol in here.
So if there's aluminum in here, we should see it start to bubble,
right? The continuous evolution of hydrogen gas. Right now what we're seeing is a separation of the layers between these two.
It cleared right up though.
Yeah. There we see the two layers, but we have no evolution of hydrogen gas.
So at least in this sample we don't have any aluminum.
In order to further test the jet fuel for aluminum, Doctors Gentner and Davis decide on a more rigorous experiment using an atomic absorption spectrometer. The machine can detect the presence of substances down to parts per million.
So what it allows you to do is it allows you to take unknown samples and compare those samples to see where they're similar and where they're different.
The two scientists will compare the jet fuel sample with a number of other solutions, including the closely related product, kerosene.
So then what we're going to do is put our fuel samples in here, draw it in through this tube, have it atomized, sprayed into the flame, and we're going to look to see if there's any absorption due to the aluminum that would be in the fuel. Yes.
Down in the emissions test lab, Ray Rust has donned his protective headgear, turned on the ventilation system, and he's now ready to begin the experiment.
One of the major inputs into a jet engine, which has a major influence on the exhaust, is the air that you're pulling in. We have a much higher level of control here than you would out in the atmosphere. Our air isn't being contaminated by another jet that we happen to be following.
Two intake nozzles sample the jet engine emission at the exit port. One leads to the particulate filter. A second nozzle leads to an exhaust gas analyzer. As the equipment goes to work, upstairs in the chemistry lab, Doctors Davis and Gertner are about to test the liquid jet fuel in the atomic absorption spectrometer.
So what we're going to do then is we've got a light bulb that is essentially producing light or radiation that is going to be absorbed by a flame.
The jet fuel sample will be sucked up as a very fine mist and burned in the flame. If aluminum is present in our sample fuel, it will give off a warm color flame.
The lamp in here is producing radiation given off by essentially aluminum foil that's been excited.
This aluminum-treated solution indicates how our fuel sample should look if the metal is present.
Now, if there's any aluminum species dissolved in our samples, that aluminum will interact and absorb some of that radiation, so the output will be different than when there's no aluminum there.
With all the tests now complete in the chemistry and emissions labs, it's time to feed all the data into the computers.
We, calibrated our equipment. We used our best level research grade equipment. I mean, we used in this project probably between $1 million and $2 million worth of equipment for testing. So we tried to go at it using the objectivity of a scientist.
Will our tests for aluminum and jet fuel support the chemtrail believers' case? Or will the results create even more controversy? Next on Best Evidence.
There is a gene that separates man from animal. Some are born without it.
I have no idea what you're missing.
Skinwalkers. Now playing.
The fans just want more. And more they shall have. Mythbusters this fall.
The latest video games are here at the Walmart Electronics Department.
Take full advantage of your team's strengths and exploit your opponent's weaknesses. In Madden NFL 08, with the all-new Read and React system, you can now identify mismatches prior to the snap and look to capitalize on big play opportunities on every play. Also featuring new player spotlighting, spectacular catches, and incredibly smooth gameplay. Madden NFL 08 from EA Sports, rated E for everyone.
We'll beat every retailer's new release prices on video games every day.
There are food combos that are full of themselves, and some that are just full of good stuff.
You got me hooked on the Special K fruit and yogurt.
Isn't it great?
Don't even get me started. The yogurty flavor, the fruit clusters, it's totally got it together.
It's food that just feels good.
Let's have a moment for feeling good. And we're back.
Why try the delicious goodness of new Special K fruit and yogurt flavor cereal? Because feeling good never looked better.
Are you ready? Tomorrow on Discovery Channel.
Hey, call me. Call me.
Call me. With Fido's unlimited incoming calls packages, feel free to tell everyone.
Call me.
Earth Shocks, Sunday, only on Discovery Channel.
Men are all about technology. Like Gillette Clear Gel Antiperspirant with triple protection system. It locks out odor, helps keep you dry, makes you smell great all day. Gillette Clear Gel Antiperspirant. Triple protection system for men.
Nothing refreshes like Nest tea.
Superhumans with super abilities. They live amongst us. A man born without eyes creates images of objects he has never seen. An Iceman tolerates freezing temperatures with minimal physical effects. A human abacus solves complex mathematical equations using only his mind's eye. These are the real superhumans, coming this fall.
I think that there's a lot of atmospheric testing going on, and that's where some of the chemicals come from.
Rosalind Peterson and others believe that some jet contrails contain chemical additives. They're part of secret government weather modification programs. Dr. Greg Davis heads the team of technicians and scientists who agreed to examine a sample of commercial jet fuel.
So what we've done is we've conducted a number of experiments to try and look for signs of things like aluminum being in the fuel. Look for differences between jet fuel that we bought commercially at the local airport here in Flint and kerosene, which would be a very similar fuel in terms of the fuel properties as jet fuel, but it would be clean, presumably, of aluminum. And so we've been comparing those two fuels.
Emissions from the jet fuel were tested in a fully operational scale model jet engine.
The process produces the same exhaust that you'd get out of any jet engine.
The emissions test looked at any solid particles in the exhaust soot using a special quartz filter.
See, and you can see the difference. There's the clean side, there's the dirty side.
The filter is placed in a special device that will burn it and examine the products of the combustion.
So I'm going to just leave this closed for a minute.
The quartz filter that would have captured any evidence of aluminum in the engine's exhaust is now ready for analysis.
And now what you should see is we'll see, actually, if we watch here, we should see a couple spikes start to take off. Well, the conclusions we found were pretty much what we expected when we started out, are that there's no significant differences between the samples of jet fuel we tested and the kerosene. If you look at that response, it is, essentially identical.
As an additional test, Best Evidence asked the scientists at Kettering to analyze the exhaust gases emitted by our jet fuel sample. Some chemtrail believers suspect sulfur could be used in atmospheric cooling experiments that could help reverse global warming.
EPA regulations are requiring us to remove sulfur because the SO2 compounds are hard on our lungs. So even if sulfur compounds were good at cooling the earth off, we certainly wouldn't want to be adding them in fuel.
But the gas emissions analyzer did find minute traces of sulfur, however, within the acceptable range.
The sulfur readings look very normal. It looks like regular commercial fuel, very similar to diesel.
There's one final test result that uses an atomic absorption spectrometer.
We're looking for absorption of that aluminum frequency light. And that would occur if there was aluminum in that fuel. And we didn't see any significant difference there. You have to realize that we're measuring things on the level, parts per million level.
Millions of dollars worth of equipment and the expertise of several chemical and mechanical engineers at Kettering University failed to locate the presence of statistically significant amounts of aluminum or sulfur compounds in our sample of jet fuel.
The problem you have with all these experiments is
We did use just one sample. Now, I will indicate we went right out to the airport. You know, they didn't pull some special sample for us. It was just standard commercial grade fuel, aviation fuel. But people are always going to argue the fact that, well, that's just one sample. So maybe they're not doping the fuel here in Flint, Michigan.
If no one is doping commercial jet fuel anywhere else, and additives are not responsible for higher levels of aluminum in the atmosphere, then chemtrail believers say it could be coming from military jets.
The United States Air Force releases tons of aluminum-coated fiberglass called chaff over California and other states.
This form of aluminum is injected directly into the atmosphere by military aircraft. Could it account for the higher doses of aluminum that chemtrail believers say accompanies unusual aircraft activity? We'll investigate that on Best Evidence.
In a kingdom ruled by evil, a star will fall.
You're the star. Can you get me back to the sky?
Some will rise to destroy her.
When I find her, all of us shall be young again.
Others will fight to defend her.
Have no fear. No one will harm you.
Touché. This summer,
Get her. Hold on tight!
the chase begins. Stardust. Now playing.
These may look like just any pair of glasses, but these aren't just any lenses. They're pearl-thin Easy View lenses, a new kind of progressive lens from Pearl Vision. Advanced digital technology makes these lenses more comfortable. They widen your field of vision and allow you to transition seamlessly from distance to intermediate to reading, so you can focus more naturally. New pearl-thin Easy View lenses are just another way Pearl Vision can help you see more.
Bagel Boy.
Bagel boy?
Yeah, every day, same time. Bagel Boy gets a toasted bagel.
Well, he's gotta have a name.
Bagel, eh?
Yeah, toasted, buttered, 12-grain bagel. Delicious.
Tim Hortons, right?
You know it.
Nothing beats a Tim Hortons 12-grain bagel with the goodness of 12 different grains baked right in.
Bagel Boy really knows his bagels.
Oh, forgot to get his name.
Always fresh, always Tim Hortons.
Everybody's talking about it.
Chevrolet's chart-busting.
Chance of a lifetime, bigger than life, bigger than life. Bigger than wife, bigger than life.
Life.
That's good. Super incredible.
One more time.
Do that again.
We're just gonna call it Chevrolet's huge clearance event.
Discover some of the best vehicles in the industry, backed by the best coverage in Canada. Now with 0% financing for 60 months on most 07 models. Get the best deals of the season during Chevrolet's huge clearance event. Hurry into your Chevrolet dealer today.
I've been saying some controversial things about Molson Canadian. I've asked about this alleged true Canadian taste and wondered if it's brewed by Canada's oldest brewery. Does that really matter? Now, overall, people haven't reacted well, but the people here have treated me with respect and admiration.
Thank you, Alberta! Thank you! I've enjoyed your meat!
There's only one true Canadian taste. Molson Canadian Lager.
This fall, Discovery Channel presents a major television event in our lifetime.
We have ignition for the first human expedition to the planet Mars.
We will face the challenge.
This mission is a go for Mars capture.
Nothing can stop us now.
Race to Mars. What will it take?
What was that? It's a power spike. Roger, Terra Nova. You have an electrical power system event.
Who will be the first to set foot on Mars? Humanity's greatest story yet.
I'm sure I don't have to tell you that our thoughts are with you up there.
Race to Mars launches September 23rd.
It's the one thing they couldn't prepare us for, isn't it? More alone than anyone. Ever.
Best evidence testing at Kettering University in Flint, Michigan, of liquid and engine emissions for commercial aircraft revealed no significant traces of either aluminum or sulfur. These substances are often cited by people who believe normal jet contrails are actually laden with experimental chemicals.
Looking up from ground level, we can observe chemtrails that are much different from the normal condensation trail.
The visual evidence is mounting, and with it, the chemtrail believers' concerns have grown. What the scientists at Kettering University tested was commercial jet fuel. The United States Air Force did not grant Best Evidence's request for a sample of the high-performance fuel they use in military jet aircraft. And that, according to those who believe in chemical contrails, raises another concern.
The United States Air Force releases tons of aluminum-coated fiberglass called chaff over California and other states.
Chaff isn't an aluminum fuel additive. It's ejected from the underbelly of a military aircraft to confuse radar and avoid detection by enemy surveillance.
They're like little needles coated with aluminum, and they're bundled together, and they have been used since the Second World War to produce artificial targets for radar.
Chaff drifting in the air can also help scientists track wind currents.
When it's released from an aircraft, these needles are so small and so lightweight they follow the air motion. So it's a very clever way of getting wind measurements in clear air.
Chaff technology can therefore be used in tracking weather modification experiments.
The Department of Defense just a year or two ago sponsored a workshop in Washington, D.C. on weather modification. So it makes you wonder if, in fact, the military is still continuing to address weather modification in their toolkit. And that's fine. I have no problem with that.
For every convincing statistic and dramatic visual about something strange going on in the skies, there's a counter-argument from the skeptics that's equally persuasive. Whether anyone can be proven innocent or guilty, there's little doubt that the technology and the potential for chemical contrail experimentation does exist.
I've contacted the U.S. Air Force, and they said, we are not doing that. It's not true. This is the same body that has come out with a report owning the weather in 2025, calling for weather force specialists flying tankers to lay reflective particles in an operation they call aerial obscuration.
We need to take advantage of everybody on this planet to help solve the problem of global warming. If we can do it with some form of climate engineering, all the better.
According to chemtrail believers like Rosalind Peterson, Dave Dickey, and Will Thomas, the evidence seems irrefutable. They're convinced that chemicals are being placed in the atmosphere using jet aircraft and their contrails. These activities, they say, are reckless attempts at climate change, and they are being kept a secret.
In the winter of 2005, the United States government established a Federal Bureau of Weather Modification in Washington, D.C. This is a government-mandated agency whose stated mission is to modify the weather and climate. Under this rubric, I believe they could come out and admit to a chemtrail-type project.
The case we call chemical contrails may never be solved without full government disclosure. And yet neither side in the debate denies that contrails are a problem. Contrails are a natural consequence of jet travel. They spread and linger and become part of the cloud cover over the Earth. Scientists acknowledge that in this way they contribute to global warming.
We don't have 100 years. We have maybe 20 years before we start seeing some of the serious effects of climate change.
Eyewitness accounts, backed up by satellite images, prove just how widely contrails are blanketing the planet. But what isn't clear is whether any program is actually underway in our blue skies while the public remains in the dark.
I would not be surprised to see in the next year or two, as public clamor increases for something to be done to mitigate the worst effects of climate change, that the U.S. government could come out and admit to this program.
If we're not going to be able to come up with replacement technologies in time, we're not going to be able to regulate emissions in time, we're really left with taking these other extraordinary means. The goal is to reduce the warming of the Earth before the catastrophe comes.
You're watching Discovery Channel.